Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Oxford Business Insights podcast. I'm delighted to welcome Alisdair Pettigrew today of Blue Communications, and we're going to learn about his business journey in a really interesting field of maritime communications. So, Alisdair, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Nick.
Okay, so we're going to go on and talk about things. A business that was founded in the middle of the financial crash. Quite specific sector specialisms, talking about a relatively recent acquisition and the future of maritime and renewable communications. And we're going to hear a story from sort of newsroom to boardrooms. Alisdair spent his career translating complex maritime stories into influence and growth. Alisdair, thank you for coming on board. Tell us a little bit how you got into journalism in the first place, because I know that's where you started your career.
I guess that they always talk about PR being the dark arts, but so I definitely turned to the dark arts from ambitions to be a journalist.
Yep.
And I always wrote, contributed, I should say, to the sort of the university magazine. Had an interest in news, always had an avid interest in news.
Yep.
I took a job in Tokyo as an English language teacher. I managed to get a copywriting job with a magazine called the Tokyo Journal, which was basically a bit like Time Out for Tokyo.
Right, okay.
So English language magazine, and that really piqued my interest. And took a postgrad when I returned to the UK in newspaper journalism. I'm not sure they use the word newspaper anymore. There's also a broadcast course as well up in Lancashire, University of Lancashire, and from there. I had 1 week working with the East Lothian Courier as their roving reporter before I was kind of asked to go down to London and got a job with the Yomiuri Shimbun, which is actually was certainly at the time the largest newspaper in the world, that was sort of utilizing my Japanese experience.
Okay.
And so I was there for 2 years as an assistant correspondent down on just off Fleet Street, and that was a great experience to cut my teeth. And then did a bit of moonlighting for the Sun and the Independent in the evening, trying to get that sort of writing job. So the majority of my time with the Japanese newspaper was supporting a Japanese correspondent.
Right.
I did get some fantastic gigs. You know, I went up to Althorp and met Lady Diana's brother, and interviewed David Beckham and things like that. So it was definitely a fantastic experience, but I wasn't writing.
Yeah.
And applied for a job with Lloyd's List, which I hadn't heard of, but happened to be the oldest newspaper in the world, covering sort of the shipping markets primarily. And there was a job as the energy reporter, if you like,
Right.
which got me writing full time.
Very good. And so you do have a little bit of connection with Oxford because you're at university at Oxford Brookes, is that right?
I was,
And
yeah.
and did that build a connection with this part of the world? Tell us a little bit how you
Absolutely,
spaced
yeah.
in a number
No,
of places,
I have very
but
fond
you've got an
memories
Oxford
of.
connection.
Yeah, no, I have a real affinity with Oxford. I'm from Edinburgh originally. I think
Yeah.
there are some parallels.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely it's aesthetically beautiful. It's a good place to live, and I have a lot of sort of positive experiences when I was a student here. As I mentioned, I went off to Tokyo and London for some years. Always maintained a good bunch of friends here. And yeah, sort of ended up here, and I've had my sort of three kids here, and it's a great place
Excellent.
to raise a family. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so you went through from journalism, but so there's quite a leap for a journalist to found your own PR and communications agency called Blue
Yeah.
Communications. Tell us a little bit about the story, how you spotted the market gap and how you got that business off the ground.
No, exactly. You're right. There's probably a little bit of a gap between that sort of, slightly sort of inexperienced, naive journalist and turning to PR. I actually took another job as a director of a company called Petromedia that owned a couple news websites.
Right.
And I started a website called sustainableshipping.com while I was there in 2005,
Yeah.
and a series of events as well around sustainable shipping. I really enjoyed the whole environmental, marine environment piece, which was just starting to become increasingly important within the shipping industry at that time. And I was living in Vancouver for about 18 months. So I was able to sort of, I felt a real affinity with the sea. There were a lot of
Yeah.
big shipping companies there. We had a couple of brilliant events in LA and San Francisco. And there was real engagement around the marine environment, as you can imagine, particularly on the West Coast.
Yeah.
So sort of took all that and managed to do quite well commercially. I realized I was actually quite interested and motivated in the business side of things.
Yeah.
Managed to get some shares, and it was a really sort of meeting my current business partner Nick, where we both agreed that there was a lack of real strategic communications,
Right.
PR communications within the maritime sphere. The joke was always like the marketing investment would be sponsoring the coffee mugs, an event for the year, and so we felt there was a real opportunity to raise the bar. His experience was in strictly sort of B2B PR, and
Yeah.
so I met him when he was working with Shell Marine, and yeah, he was working at a very high level. I thought he was incredibly professional. He seemed to have a lot more money than me as well, so that definitely appealed to me. And so we launched Blue with our old sort of still maintaining our old jobs, him in
Right.
PR, me in publishing, and then realized we were starting to do work quite well. We didn't own it, and so there was a sort of few awkward discussions with the owners, and we basically
Yeah.
threatened to go and do something ourselves, and
Yeah.
we managed to buy them out at that point.
Right. Okay. So, what were those early years like? As I said on the introduction, that was sort of 2008, peak financial crisis. I would imagine that hit the shipping industry, but you seem to get off the ground
Yeah.
pretty well.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's also a story there because strangely, our second client was a significant size, but they insisted on sending someone to Singapore. So even though we didn't, I don't think we even had a website at the time, albeit it was a while ago. So
Yeah.
websites weren't quite as sort of ubiquitous as they are now. But we put sort of someone that worked for Nick, my business partner, in Singapore. And actually, Singapore, we had, I think, 6 people in 2010, just before
Wow.
the collapse. And we had 2 or 3 in the UK. And I think, to not to stereotype culturally, but there was a big difference in the way that market reacted compared to Europe. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that was based on the sort of trust we'd engendered with some of our clients here. And actually, the shutters really came down in
Right.
Asia during that period. And so we ended up closing the office there. So it was definitely not a smooth
Yeah.
sort of voyage through that recession. And yeah, we definitely didn't time it very well in starting Blue, but we did manage to get through. And I would say that the main reason for that was because at that time Nick and I were, really trusted by
Yeah.
some clients. They saw us as integral to their business, like very much working as peers,
Yeah.
confidants, and yeah, I think that's what saw us through. And then I think slowly also other clients were beginning to see that we were a little bit different from,
Yeah.
the sponsoring the coffee mugs type of agency, and that there was some strategy
Yeah.
required, and actually that brand was fundamentally really important in the maritime industry, as it is in aviation, as it is in logistics, as it is in renewable energy. Just because brands aren't necessarily consumer facing
Yeah.
doesn't mean that brand is not
No, of
really
course.
essential to the value you're creating.
Okay. So I can imagine in sometimes though with some clients you are really probably having to have a conversation. Well, why is branding important to you? Because I imagine some are pretty big organisations that really weren't into branding or any sort of
Yeah,
sophisticated marketing. But were you introducing the whole concept to them sometimes in the first place?
to some degree, yeah. I mean, there was I think a sort of pivotal moment for the maritime industry was, as you just hinted at, Nick, a lot of businesses, even large ones, felt it was in their interest to keep hidden.
Yeah,
So that would, be advantageous not to comment when a journalist approached you,
yeah,
to be aloof. And actually, let's be honest, even to this day, there are still a lot of organizations that still benefit from the sort of fragmented nature of where you can register a ship or flag a ship, or
yeah.
which came out with things like the Panama Papers. So I'm not suggesting that doesn't exist, but Maersk, which at the time certainly was the largest shipping company in the world, was very quiet. I remember calling them as a journalist; they'd always say no comment. And then the front page of the Danish national newspaper, Boardroom,
Yeah.
had a headline that basically said Maersk, this big Danish shipping company, emitted more carbon than the whole of Denmark.
Wow.
Probably wasn't a good day for the comms team at Maersk. And so it was interesting just to see how they reacted over time. So they went from, I think they had one comms guy to a team of at least 10
Right.
communications professionals building their brand team, their marketing team. And actually, if you look at Maersk now, they are hugely respected and proficient in the way they manage their brand, the way they're very transparent and communicating. And so that definitely helped us, I think, because we were preaching that, but obviously our voice wasn't as significant as Maersk, and I think others would see that. And I think what's we've definitely recognized is that for a lot of our clients, they sell something into the industry, whether they're selling, an AI data tool or wind clean technology that would be sort of very efficient to have on the vessel. There's competition, and where there's competition, one of the main ways to distinguish yourself is on your organization is through brand
Yeah.
and through building brand. And so the more commoditized the market becomes, the more I think in any industry, the more important brand becomes in terms of differentiation.
Excellent. So, okay, so over time you've established Blue Communications, but it's kind of evolved from PR, I guess PR led. I know you have more strategic conversations into a sort of like integrated brand and digital agency. How long did that take you to build up that reputation? Clearly, you're working with one or two clients at the first, but talk us through a little bit about that journey, because that was probably a very well timed journey as well as in
Yeah,
terms of what was happening. So, give us a little bit about the background on that.
yeah, Nick, it's a good question because I think some of us that've been around for a while, probably could see that the way we were communicating was changing, but I'll be honest, probably didn't fully grasp just how it was changing and how important and significant digital communication would
Yeah.
become. And we're still in that journey, as you know. Um, and I actually met a CEO of a larger agency, a B2B agency in London, and he was very open. And he said one of the best thing he'd done was hire a couple of digital marketing professionals and sort of explore why and how he thought that was important. And the reality was that the digital marketing team were taking the same content that his PR team were developing because of their knowledge and skill, but they were really just channeling it through additional conduits, if you like. So, web content around a blog that could then be used for social, that's then sort of with clever algorithms optimized for SEO.
Yeah.
And so there's a lovely sort of self-fulfilling prophecy around, if you are in sort of getting some media coverage, you take that media coverage and create a blog, or take the link to the media coverage up for your LinkedIn, and actually it all feeds in to improving your Google ranking. I think, in fact, more recently, even in the last 6 months, we're seeing our digital marketing team recognize that AI is recognizing genuine, honest, transparent content. So,
Yeah.
which is something we've always been preaching, but thankfully, the days of having to put keywords in are now gone,
Yeah.
and it's more sophisticated, and in a sense, it benefits, I think, what we do with that degree of knowledge and specialism.
Yeah.
and our ability to grasp topics for our clients. And the more we encourage them to engage in issues and challenges and talk less about themselves and product, the higher their ranking
Yeah, excellent.
becomes. So that's sometimes a challenge because people tend to like to talk about themselves and what they do.
And in terms of the size of businesses you're dealing with, your client base, obviously I know you deal with some of the biggest shipping companies in the world. How has that evolved in terms of the type of companies? Because I imagine that what you've just described is applicable to, it's not micro businesses, but yeah, small, medium-sized businesses as well
Yeah.
as the commercial giants.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. So one of the things I think we're most proud of is that from a fairly sort of small embryonic start in Oxford, we now have clients, I think, in 22 countries.
Wow.
We have a much larger team now in London than we did back in the day, just because from a recruitment perspective, it's so much easier there. Um, but yeah, in terms of our client base, we're working with multi-billion-dollar companies that no one probably has ever heard of, which I really like. I really love that. It's a well-kept secret. So from very large technology companies, we have a client that's in the top 10 largest companies in Norway. They're called Kongsberg, and I'm guessing no one's really heard of them. I think they turn over like 4 or 5 billion euros a year. We work with Bureau Veritas, which is a large French classification society on the marine and offshore side, just
Yeah.
one portion of that business, but they have 100,000 employees. So, and then sort of at that end, all the way down to, we're working with a really cool technology company called Armada, and they are essentially sort of developed a technology that will pump water bubbles under the hull of a ship to reduce the friction and therefore
Wow.
increase energy efficiency. And they're just a sort of the CEO actually lives up in Chipping Norton,
Right.
and he's an engineer background. I think there's maybe only 5 or 6 of them,
Yeah.
but there's the opportunity for us there, and probably I would argue it's one of the ones we love it when we can get in at that
Yeah.
early stage and hopefully take that journey with them. So the full gamut. I think we had about 100 clients in 2024, of which I'd say just over half would be retained.
Right.
So we have a retained relationship.
Okay. Have
Yeah.
you ever? I'm going to come on to. I know you made an acquisition recently, but during that journey, were you ever? You've maintained a fairly clear focus on your niche, the maritime, and I know it's evolved probably into sustainability and perhaps more wider energy. Were you ever tempted to go more broad brush in terms of? You've obviously got core skills that could be applied to many industries.
Yeah. So I mean, I joked with you before, Nick, and I tend to say this to most people. Maritime is a $1 trillion niche. So, it's kind of niche in some ways. To us, it feels pretty big, but even from that maritime core, there's the whole offshore market.
Yeah.
So, of course, there was offshore oil and gas, which is now very much sort of moving into offshore wind, which we are
Yeah.
very much, sort of au fait with, and we have a number of clients in that world because of the transition around fuels in maritime and energy, which we always had a background in. We've picked up a lot of knowledge around green hydrogen, and that's scaling up, not just for maritime, but for sort of a
Yeah.
multitude of other big industries. And then, as you hinted there, we acquired a small agency down in Poole last year called Saltwater, specializing in the marine leisure market, some
Right.
super yachts as well. So definitely more glamorous than the ships we're used to. So, we kind of feel that we are in 3 segments, albeit from the outside looking in, it probably doesn't look like that. But so we have that, if you like, sort of offshore wind, green fuels under the renewable energy bracket, marine leisure, super yachts,
Yeah.
and then maritime. And of course, even within maritime, there's ports,
Yeah.
there's sort of the elements of the offshore market. There's the cruise market, the ferry market. So it's kind of multifaceted.
Absolutely. I think it's not so much. I think people, if they don't think about the sectors you just talked about, that they might assume it's a bit niche. When you start thinking about it, yeah, you can see
Yeah.
it's actually a massive territory. So a bit of a dumb question, but anyway, I
No,
like
not at
dumb
all.
questions. So look, I also happen to know you did rather well during COVID, which for a lot of businesses and even transportation was certainly a challenging time. So tell us a little bit about your experience of during the COVID years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to recognize that for many people and companies, it was a super tough time. So certainly not something, we want to sort of shout about too much. But I think just because of the international nature of our world, as you know, as you'd imagine, that all the big exhibitions, there's sort of usually two or three really significant size ones in Europe,
Yeah,
particularly every year. They were shut down. All the conferences were shut down. We very much pivoted, didn't we, to a Zoom and
yeah,
lastly Teams world. And so, our travel budgets just disappeared overnight. I don't like to even talk about what they are. So that went. I think we were just able to work more efficiently generally.
yeah,
We were very generous landlord with our office and another office we were able to sort of sever the lease with. So just accumulatively,
right,
uh, and then I think the other one, sort of on the other side, was clients recognized they still wanted to engage,
yeah,
and so we started doing a lot. We hosted a lot of webinars.
yeah,
We have webinar software. We moderate panel discussions, and so we generated fee income from doing a lot of webinars for our clients
yeah.
and hosting those. So it was kind of that twofold thing. Costs were down, and we were able to increase our fees a bit.
Okay. And so thinking about how technologies emerge and constantly emerging, um, tell us a little bit about how you might deploy for some of your maritime brand building systems and how it's different to perhaps it was 10 years ago in terms of the technology. What would you lead with these days? Podcast, exhibitions? Is there still a
Yeah.
place for that
So
for exhibitions?
yes, I mean, as you know, Nick, the first question is, sort of, what's the strategy? What's the objective? Um, I think what's really cool, frankly, about what we're able to do now is that we have sort of the whole gamut. So, the industry term would be we're a fully integrated consultancy or agency, and so we're actually working on a project now with which has started with the creative, so sort of a big idea.
Yeah,
So that sort of came that big idea, which the client loves. So it will kick off a series of campaigns that dig into certain segments of the industry. So the first one is decarbonisation. There's one about life cycle. There's one about digitalization, but they're all triggered by this big creative idea.
right.
And so we get to develop that from a creative perspective, to design it into ads, to digital ads, all that sort of stuff. But then we're also creating a narrative,
Yeah,
a hub for their website around those 4 or 5 pots I mentioned. And because of our industry knowledge, we're hopefully developing sort of powerful content that resonates with the industry around those issues. So positioning this client as a genuine thought leader, someone that really understands what's going on. So and then that's all augmented by some quite sophisticated digital marketing. So
yeah.
paid campaigns, maybe some. We are definitely doing a series of video podcasts for them as well. So it is the full gamut, and that's the panacea for us. But it doesn't always work
Yeah,
like that,
absolutely.
but it's great to see it when it happens like that.
Okay. Now, in terms of your sector, and talk a little bit about the people within your business, the culture within the business, and how you recruit and attract and retain talent. I mean, do you go out and look for specialists if you were bringing on somebody who know the maritime industry or renewable energy industry, whatever the sector is, or do you just try and bring in raw talent and develop that?
Yeah, the latter.
Right.
So we're definitely always looking for talent in Oxfordshire, as well as London, and I think anyone that has good PR skills and experience and or digital marketing, and indeed now sort of design and
Yeah.
brand, we're always interested in chatting to them. I think the key additional ingredient is when they look at an industry like maritime and renewable energy, they maybe see through it a little bit, because
Yeah.
for me the reason these are so exciting is that they're both facing so a sizable challenge in the sense that there's an energy transition and a digital transition. So just as we're talking about AI every day in terms of how it's going to impact our lives and our jobs and our children's jobs, it's impacting these industries. And then if you take maritime, it emits the same level of carbon as the entire country of Germany, and it's growing in terms of its emissions, whereas Germany's is falling
Yeah.
considerably. So there is a massive challenge in terms of switching that industry from fossil fuel to what will be a green hydrogen probably based fuel.
Yeah.
And these are challenges that need communication. They need
Yeah.
dialogue, debate, and discussion. So I think what we're seeing is hopefully, and I mean, and definitely some feedback we've had from new recruits is that they wanted to get involved with Blue because we're dealing with some big macro global issues.
Okay.
And even if you take it away from those two pieces, right now, unfortunately, ships are having to go around the Cape of Good Hope because they can't get through the Red Sea because of the geopolitical tension in the Middle East. Or we have 700 ships that are the so-called dark fleet, which are essentially Russian flag vessels
Yeah.
that turn their responders off so we can't track them. So there's a multitude of global impactful issues and challenges we deal with on a daily basis for our
Yeah.
clients. So I think one of our tasks, and thank you for the opportunity, is bringing it to life a little
Yeah.
bit. Shipping sounds a bit boring, but actually it's really quite interesting.
And I know that the port market is also sort of coming landside. It is a very competitive market. As new entrants, Middle Eastern money has gone into a lot of
Yeah,
ports and developments.
yeah,
But they seem to be, they're going to be quite critical in terms of not just the UK, but for many countries in developing, whether it's free trading zones, free ports, or other things. Is that an area that you see as a growth area for you?
uh, yeah. I mean, we've definitely had port clients in the past. I think it's generally where there's some competition, Nick. So we worked, for example, with the port of Cork,
Yeah.
who were competing against the port of Dublin.
Yeah.
But again, that's about brand. To some
Yeah.
extent, it's like building brand, but telling the story of why. I think Cork was a sort of the deepest port in Ireland and the most accessible port, and so building a story around that. So I think to your point around trade, ports need trade. That's their lifeblood. So I think there is a degree to which they need to invest in their brand and their reputation.
Yeah.
And I think the UK. I was meant to be in Thamesport yesterday. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go. But the UK is obviously a huge importer as well as exporter, and you know, whether there's an opportunity around free trade zones in a sort of new American US tariff world, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, ports are absolutely a significant piece in the jigsaw.
Excellent. Okay. And so, looking forward, you've kind of touched on it, but in terms of Bluecom still growing, do you see more acquisitions, or is it about going into new verticals, or just working the areas you're in as hard as possible, because they're gonna expand in themselves, but they're also going to need more and more of your services by the sound of it as the world goes by.
Yeah, yeah. And if you'd asked me in 2010, what we'd be doing, I would have said, well, by 2013, we'll have hit a glass ceiling in terms of the number of clients
Right.
we could work with in shipping. But that's not been the case as the industry's grown and expanded into these, digital data,
Yeah.
clean tech territories. We've been the beneficiaries. Um, we absolutely see a growth market around renewables, obviously, because that's only going one direction.
Yeah.
Um, and certainly the marine leisure and super yacht market is growing too. So for those three verticals for us, there's a real opportunity. But yes, in addition to that, we really do want to. I think what we recognise, hopefully, our clients agree, is that we are operating in a strategic communications and brand global sort of client base, and that has value. And so we do believe that there's an opportunity to maybe acquire smaller agencies in related verticals, maybe logistics, air cargo, that kind of world, and sort of hopefully professionalize what they're doing too. That's very much the plan. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, I obviously wish you luck with that, and good to see a business with an Oxford connection, although you operate, I think it's in 22 countries worldwide. It's great to see an Oxford presence expanding so significantly. Okay, well, look, I think that's been a fantastic run through what Blue Communications deliver, the history and the background. And I always think it's interesting, how did people arrive into the business they're working at. So if people want to find out a bit more about you, what's the best way of finding that out? Whether it's somebody who might be interested in working for you, or a potential client, or what's the best way? Is it LinkedIn, website? What's the best way?
Yeah, so absolutely. Please go and look at the website. We have an inquiry form there. It's blue-comms,
Yeah.
.com. There's also a saltwater hyphen comms website as well for the marine leisure side. And we'd generally love to hear from you. I
Okay.
think Oxford has been fantastic to us. I think at one point we had, I think, about 17 or 18 employees. We were in Mayfield House, which is just next to Marks and Spencer's in Summertown.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
The old Oxfam building. We have somewhat downsized, but we're still about 11 or 12 based in Oxford or Oxfordshire. And yeah, we have no intention of changing that. Certainly, I don't. So I'll be here.
Excellent.
But yeah, no, please drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. Okay. Well, look, I'd like to just wrap up and say, follow, subscribe, and we'll always put out for the people we interview. There'll always be connections through the Oxford Business Insight podcast links. So, look, finally, just to wrap up, we've had a journey from history at Brooks through journalism, setting up an agency that thought it was going to hit a glass ceiling around about 2013, still growing strong and expanding in servicing maritime transport, renewable energies, and into more specialist market like the leisure maritime and super yacht market. It's a fantastically interesting story. Got a great guy with Alisdair if people do want to get in touch with him, and really wish you every success. So look, this has been all about substance, not spin. So thank you very much, Alisdair. Thank you for your time, and look forward to getting this out to people and hopefully getting you some good new connections.
Thanks so much, Nick. Really do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.